Fantastic. Again, it is such an honor and privilege to be able to bring a little bit of birds and some raptors into your evening. We will try to leave plenty of time for questions because we got so many fantastic questions about both raptors as well as ecosystem health, and our most favorite type, what people can do to help, right? Because that is what we are all about. How do you activate people in the world around us? So a little bit about me. Will just gave such a wonderful introduction, which I appreciate very much. But I just have that honor and the privilege to serve the Raptor Center team here at the University of Minnesota. Unique from other nonprofits is I am also the Renegade Endowed Faculty Chair in Raptor and Ecosystem Health. So it means I'm faculty over at the College of Veterinary Medicine, and this position was actually endowed by our community, so supporters like you. So a lot of great thanks for all the support of the Raptor Center. If you've been to the Veterinary Medical Center, you've most likely seen the Raptor Center, right? Because we are located just across the street. Or maybe you've come in for a tour, or you brought a bird that was in need and you came to our center. Or maybe we've gotten the chance to meet you out in the community with one of our 1,200 education programs that we do every year. So we're excited to see you again if we've already met you, but also excited to share if you haven't met us yet. So we're a bit of an interesting setup. We fundraise the majority of our own budget here at the Raptor Center. In fact, almost 100% of our hospital operations are supported by the community, which we're so grateful for. Our connection to the university, though, enables our veterinarians, who are faculty members at the College of Vet Med, to do an extremely high level of teaching and research and global training programs, where we look at not just the health of raptors, but the environment and ecosystems we share with. And you're also going to get to meet some just crucial, essential members of our team from our bird and education side as we go throughout tonight as well. We're very proud to be in our 50th anniversary this year. So we have lots of exciting events coming this fall. So make sure to stay tuned and we'll be launching stuff this fall. Over 50 years, we have taken the position of one of, if not the busiest Raptor centers in the world. Our mission is quite simply to ensure the health of raptors and the world we share. We specialize in the medical care, rehabilitation, conservation of eagles, hawks, owls, falcons, osprey, and vultures, and also advancing ecosystem health research. Because we know that raptors live in that same environment that we as people live in as well, right? And how do we protect everything? You know, we come from humble beginnings, but pretty incredible beginnings. We were founded back in 1974, and at that time by veterinary student, now veterinarian, Dr. Pat Reddick, and his professor, Dr. Gary Tuke. The mission then and now was to treat ill and injured raptors, rehabilitate them, and get them back out into the wild. Additionally, we also knew the importance of public education. We knew we needed to focus on how do you best and most effectively inform, inspire the public, motivate them in the role that they can play in education and conservation. The Raptor Center truly is the birthplace of raptor medicine, surgery, and rehabilitation techniques. With our clinic creating and defining the best practices, we do the research and the work to validate how best to treat these animals. There's not a lot of deep data on how to fix a broken bone in a red-tailed hawk, right? Or in an eagle. Or there is a book, it was written here at the Raptor Center in orthopedic techniques, right? So, you know, really creating the techniques on how do we heal these animals. And just as important, once an animal is healed from their injury, how do we make sure that they get reconditioned or they get the muscles and the stamina and the tools that they need to go back to the wild so they can thrive and contribute to their wild species? We consult on a global basis on how to do all this. So no matter the continent or the country that someone is in, our mission is to help raptors have the best chance possible, as we also work on how do we teach, train, educate. As one of the busiest raptor centers in the world, we see over 1,000 ill, injured, and orphaned birds every single year. And this is just raptor species, remember. The best place an injured bird or raptor can end up is the Raptor Center. And I say this because if it has a chance, at a meaningful recovery, we are going to throw all of our resources and expertise towards trying to give that animal a second chance. Our veterinarians are incredible specialists. And again, they are on that front line and that cutting edge of creating these new techniques and treatments to try to give all these animals who are often coming in because of some sort of interaction with human or human object a second chance. Now, sadly, by the time a wild animal is sick enough to be caught and restrained by a human, right, they're often very, very sick. And sometimes these birds sadly do have life-ending injuries that no matter how much treatment we have, we're not going to be able to treat. So in which case we do use humane euthanasia to make sure that they don't suffer and that they're treated with the highest level of respect and dignity possible. We feel that it's an honor and a privilege to get to take care of these birds. And of the ones that get fully admitted to our hospital past our initial triage process, we can get approximately 60% back into the wild where they belong, right? So in wildlife rehab, when these birds are coming in so injured, to get over half of those birds, a second chance of the ones that get admitted to our hospital is exciting to the team that we're really being able to make an impact in the lives of these animals. Now, how do birds get to us? It starts with them being found, right? So everybody on this call, it starts with somebody finding that bird and knowing who to call, right? And over 50 years, we are so fortunate here in the state of Minnesota and surrounding areas. We have amazing stewards of wildlife, and they call us, they call the DNR, they call others, and then they end up ultimately talking to us most of the time, or some of our partners that we work with. And we start to do the rescue process, right? The rescue process, we want to be very careful with these birds. You're going to see a little bit later today, the sharp beak and the sharp talons, right? We want to make sure that the person stays safe, the bird stays safe. So we're quite good at talking folks through things over the phone. Or we use one of our 300 volunteers who are just incredible superstars and heroes that will go out and help rescue as well. But you can see a couple of the examples of how these birds come in. People get very creative with some of the different situations, which is great, making sure people stay safe and the animal stays safe and contained. But however it happens, these birds get to us. And again, this is one of our spectacular volunteers who's helping to get a bird into us that we would not be able to function as the Raptor Center without the support of our volunteers. So why are these birds coming in? How are they getting into rehab? So this is a scientific presentation. So we need at least one pie chart to show up, right? Anthropogenic, fancy word to say human cause. We have confirmed human causes for 22.8% of the birds that come in. Confirmed natural causes for 14.1%. But you can see we have this undetermined category for 63% of the birds that come into our care. And what this means is we might have a suspicion of how they came in. We might find a bird unable to fly next to a roadway, but we don't know for sure that it actually got hit by a car, right? Or it could have something else going on. Or oftentimes these birds have multiple things going on. They could have a toxicity happening that made them fly not as well. So then they ended up getting hit by a car. And on top of that, they've not been able to hunt. So now they're very skinny. So these birds come in and we have to be detectives often about what is happening and using our exams because the birds certainly aren't telling us. Which is why we have a spectacular clinic team, staff team, and volunteer team that takes care of these new admissions. The most important thing when they're coming in is that physical exam. We want to make sure that we're checking their whole bodies over, right? We're checking all of their limbs, their heart, their lungs, their different organs. We'll use a lot of techniques that you might see on your cat or dog, right? Or with people. Here we're testing the eye pressure of this northern saw-whet owl. Very small owl found across the state of Minnesota. Now again, we don't have a lot of validation on how different things are used in different species of raptors. And that's why it's so exciting that because we see so many birds at the Raptor Center, our veterinarians and technicians and rehab specialists are able to try to validate what different tools work, what different values might be, and we're able to then share that with the world when we talk about raptor medicine and surgery. We know that a huge part of a raptor's life is flight. So lots of attention paid to wings and feather condition. We have all sorts of different techniques to protect feathers. Because again, it doesn't matter how well we heal a fractured wing. If we have severe feather damage, that's not going to let them fly afterwards, right? So really holistic approaches to how we are evaluating patients as they come in and making sure we care for every part of them. Um, Diagnostics. This is one of our amazing veterinary technicians, Corinne, who's reading a blood smear as we read our own CBCs in-house here. We'll use different diagnostic tests to help give us more ideas because again, they're not coming in with a history. Radiographs. These are some beautiful digital radiographs or X-ray pictures of our radiograph machine that was funded because of community support and donor support. The community really helps us maintain the top level of care because even brilliant people, if they don't have the best equipment, right, can't do as strong of work. So we're really, really fortunate to have good supporters that can help us have incredible equipment that can take radiographs like this that are very sharp. What you can see on some of these radiographs are some injuries to bones. And we'll talk in a minute, but trauma is a major reason that raptors come into us. On your left side here, you can see some fractures in the wing, as well as a lot of abnormalities in the elbow of this raptor. So oftentimes multiple traumatic injuries can occur. And if a raptor's injured, it's often a couple different things. They might have an orthopedic or a bone injury, as well as some internal trauma, as well as some external trauma. Hit by cars, window strikes are unfortunately things that we see pretty commonly. The good news, though, is that we have amazing capacity with things like orthopedic surgery. So this is Dr. Dana, our medical director in surgery, with one of our previous veterinary interns. So in addition to having the expertise here at the Raptor Center, we have a strong mission, passion to share it and to train others that then go out and multiply impact. So this is a Dr. Michael, a graduate veterinarian who is spending an extra year of specialized training, assisting, I think this was one of his first orthopedic surgeries with Dr. Dana, as they were actually using a pin to be able to help align bones. So, it's one thing to look at x-rays or radiographs and things like that. But this was a barred owl that was getting a second chance at healing that bone. And you can see we use things like external fixators to help stabilize that bone so that it has a chance to heal. And then what we're able to do is cut some of those pins and pull it out of that bone once things have healed. So that when that bird goes back to the wild, they don't have any extra accessories in them. Now, this owl was coming out of surgery at this point, very quiet in its little towel donut. But this bird then jumped up on its feet a little bit later, even quicker than our vets were comfortable with, showing just how comfortable he was, though, with his pain control and his healing process, and eventually went back to the wild. Another reason that we see animals come in that is very pertinent right now are babies. Baby raptors. Right now, actually, the picture on the right and the picture on the left are the great horned owls. Great horned owls are actually the first babies that hatch here in the state of Minnesota. Chatting with Lori Arndt, who's our assistant director and has decades and decades of expertise around raptor natural history. And she'll tell you they have to be the first ones to hatch because they stay with their parents quite a long time. And in order to get that time with their parents, they've got to hatch earlier or sooner than later. So they're already hatched, and we've actually started to see some come into our hospital. Babies are a big conundrum because we know that they have the best chance at life if they are raised by their parents. We cannot do the job that the parents can do. So when a baby comes in, we immediately are trying to figure out, are they injured? Because sometimes they're not, and we can take them right back. Do they have a safe place to go back? Is their nest still there? Or did something happen to them? And if they are injured, what medical treatment do they have? And how can we heal them the quickest to try to get them back to their parents? We'll use things like disguises over our faces so they can't see us because we don't want them to imprint, which you'll hear about in just a minute. But the most important thing with these babies is to try to get them back to their parents where they belong. Sometimes if their nest is not suitable, we will build artificial nests. Great horns in particular are great if we put up an artificial nest and they're still hanging around. They'll take care of the parents. So one is a great horn nest, one is an eagle nest. And then here is a happy success story. We have amazing volunteer tree climbers who will climb up and strap artificial nests into trees or replace the babies. And then often we see those parents come right back as we have monitoring happen to them after. So what can you do to help right now with baby seasons? The thing that we always say is if you think something needs help, to call us, because babies don't always need help actually, so we can help assess it. Postpone any tree work right now until later in the summer and fall, up there to the nesting season. Learn more about the raptors in your area. Watch nest cams, they're awesome. Get involved with citizen science. And donate, right? We're going to have over 200 babies that need help this season. And we're about to start our baby shower, which is always very exciting. So always happy for people to join our team to get ready for babies. Now, talking about great horned owls, they are especially important because they're the ones that we're seeing coming in right now. So Megan, I think we might have an adult great horned owl that is about ready to join us and say hi to everybody. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now and we'll see if we can check in with Evan. And I think Evan might be with another educator.
Hello, everyone. My name is Evan. I'm one of the naturalists here at the Raptor Center, and I have with me today one of our great horned owl ambassadors. His name is Bubo, for his scientific name, Bubo virginianus, and he is an excellent ambassador for his species. He's one of our education birds here, and he is non-releasable in the wild. Bubo is what we call a human imprint, which means that he was found as a baby in Edgerton, Minnesota, which is in the southwest corner of the state, and he was taken in and he was cared for by people when he was still very little. So he never really learned to self-identify as a great horned owl. His brain was still developing when people were taking care of him. And so that really prevented him from being able to learn those behaviors that he would naturally learn from his parents in the wild. So he still really strongly associates people with food. He is dependent on us for the rest of his life to be able to eat. So those little noises that you can hear him making, those little chirps and chitters, are food begging calls that baby owls make. He's 23 years old. He's been with us for almost his whole life. And so he is certainly too old to be making those food begging calls. But because he associates people with food, he is making those calls to ask me for food. Today, he's eating a little bit of rat. We feed all of our prey raw and whole. We take the GI tract out, but for the most part, they're getting all of the organ meat and stuff because there's a lot of good nutrients there. Great horned owls are particularly cool because they have what are called plumicorns up on the top of their head. And those plumicorns are there for, we think, a couple different reasons. We obviously can't ask them because we don't speak owl, but one reason we think those plumicorns are there is because owls like to hunt stealthily. That's one of their preferred methods of hunting. Great horned owls are what we call crepuscular. They're not truly nocturnal. So they hunt closer to dawn and dusk. And those plumicorns help them blend in with the bark of trees. It helps break up their silhouette a little bit and allows them to camouflage really well. The other reason that they're there might be to communicate with other owls or other species as well. When he's feeling really excited or really alert, he'll put his plumicorns straight up. But if he's feeling maybe a little more subdued, he'll have them a little more relaxed like he does right now. You'll also notice how big his eyes are in relation to his head. And that's because great horned owls have incredible night vision. They can take in light really, really well because their eye, you're actually looking at the smallest part of his eye right now. Those eyes are shaped a little bit like light bulbs. So you're looking at the part that screws into the lamp. The bigger part would be in the back in his skull. And if humans had eyes proportional to their skull size, as great horned owls do, they would have eyes about the size of tennis balls, which is pretty impressive. So his eyes take up a lot of space in his skull. That also means that he can't really move them around like humans can. We can look sideways and up and down and all of those things, but in order for him to look around, he needs to bend his neck. So he has a really flexible neck that allows him to turn his head 270 degrees. So that's 3/4 of a turn. So he can look over one shoulder, straight behind him, and then over his other shoulder without turning his head, which is pretty impressive. That gives him a nice big field of vision, which allows him to see all of the prey coming from any direction. Owls, in addition to relying on their eyesight to hunt, also really rely on their hearing. And that helps them in a couple different ways. They've evolved silent flight, so their wing feathers are really fringy on the edges, which allows the air to pass through them a little more. So they sacrifice a little bit of speed and the ability to soar in exchange for being able to fly silently. And that allows them not only to be able to sneak up on their prey more effectively, but also to be able to not interfere with their own hunting because they're listening. Great gray owls have been known to find mice under a foot of snow. Great horns are pretty similar. They're able to listen for little tiny animals running around all over the place, even if they can't see them, and they can hunt just by hearing. They have asymmetrical ears, which means one ear points up and one ear points down, and they're placed a little bit differently. So not only can they triangulate the sound side to side, they can also figure out where they're listening up and down. That's part of the distinctive face shape that owls have too, as well. You'll notice he's got kind of those black C-shaped lines around the side of his face. And that is the edge of what we call his facial disc. And owls have that facial disc to act kind of like a satellite dish, like you cup your hand behind your ears, and it funnels the sound directly to their ear. So that really helps him fine tune his hearing and be able to really hone in on the prey that he's hunting. One other last cool thing about great horned owls, and then I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hall, is if you look at his feet, you'll notice his talons are nice and sharp, but he's got feathers all the way down to the tops of his talons there. That helps keep his feet a little bit quieter as they move through the air, and keeps him warm in the winter. Great horned owls spend all year in Minnesota, and so they need that nice warmth to keep their toes cozy when they are hanging out in the negative 20-degree temperatures that we get sometimes. That is all we're going to have from Bubo today, but thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with another bird in a little while.
Thank you so much, Evan, and thank you, Bubo. I always find it fantastic this time of year. You see on some of the apps like Nextdoor, the kind of like imprint of a bird in the snow. And oftentimes that can be because of a great horned owl. So if we end up getting a little bit of snow coming up, make sure to keep an eye out to see if you can see evidence of these owls hunting in our area. So you heard a little bit about the importance of why we need to have the correct action to take care of babies. We don't want to cause things like imprinting to happen, which then would make that bird unable to be released back into the wild. So calling the Raptor Center if you find a bird in need at any time, and we can help work and respond to what needs to happen. Going back to why birds are coming into the Raptor Center. If you remember in 2022, and it's still going on today, just at a different scale, we do end up dealing with infectious diseases at the Raptor Center. That's another reason birds can come in. One of the ones that's in the news quite a bit lately is highly pathogenic avian influenza. Now, this is a virus that can be carried by migratory birds like ducks and geese. Often doesn't cause them to get sick, but can be very deadly if it happens in raptors. And in fact, the Raptor Center received over 200 positive testing birds in 2022, adding a huge amount to the state disease surveillance and having enormous responses that happened. And our volunteers in the community really stepped up to make sure that these birds that were very, very sick got to us so that they could get help. But infectious disease is definitely a reason birds come in. Another one would be different toxicities that we see, lead poisoning, rodenticide. So rat bait raptors can unfortunately be an unintended consequence of the use of rat bait if they eat mice or rats that have it in their systems. And we also worry about other contaminants. If you remember, about a year ago, we had a number of bald eagles get very sick with barbiturates. So a huge reminder that what we put in the environment becomes part of the environment, and animals like raptors, who are at the top of the food chain, can be an indicator of what we're putting out there. So an animal comes in for a multitude of reasons we just talked about. They get their veterinary or medical time. We find out through our exam everything that's happening in them. We make their treatment plan. Orthopedic injury ones get all sorts of different bandaging and physical therapy and top of the line care while they're with us. They stay in smaller cages when they're in their time of healing, because it's hard to tell a bald eagle to just sit quietly, right? So by creating dark and smaller environments, it can help keep our especially diurnal raptors calm, because it's very stressful. These are wild birds, right? Bubo's a different example. Bubo has a new life now since he can't be released as an educator. So he's very comfortable because we want him to be comfortable with people. That way he can do a good job educating while having good welfare. Our patients, though, are wild and we want them to stay wild. So it is stressful to be with us. So we use all sorts of techniques to try to reduce their stress. So these are some of our custom crates. As they start to heal, they move into bigger areas, right? So on the left is one of our inside flight pens that has nice cushioning on the wall to help protect the birds. And on the right is our outdoor flight pen. Because you can imagine, if we're releasing birds year round, you can't take a bird straight from a cozy hospital, right? Right out into a Minnesota winter. So we use the outside pens to really make sure these birds acclimate. Now, if a bird's been sitting in a cage for a period of time, trying to heal from a fracture or a toxicity or just unknown causes of trauma, they're going to lose muscles. And we need these birds to be their athlete self. So when they go back to the wild. Now we have different criteria. A peregrine falcon's going to need a different level of fitness than, say, Bubo or a great horned owl. But we know through all sorts of history of studies and looking at things like lactate levels in blood, how fit they need to be to go back to the wild. And we use a process called creancing, which is where we put jesses on the legs of the bird, and then we attach a line to them. And then we have them fly the length of the field. So if you come to the St. Paul campus or even Como, you might have seen us flying some of our birds. And to show you a quick video of it, the birds are released. They fly to the end of the line that's attached to them. And we use different lines based on the size of the bird, so it doesn't interfere with their flight. And then they are gently braked. This is all done with our expert volunteers. They're gently braked at the end so that they come down to the ground very safely. And then they will go again. And they'll get put into an exercise program. This way we can also evaluate how their flight is going, the symmetry of their flight, and their fitness, and if they're getting tired or fatigued. Now, of course, our most favorite thing that happens is when we say goodbye to these guys. When we say our final goodbye, we put a permanent band on their legs. So if they're ever recovered, we can tell, get some data from that. But when we deem them fit and they're cleared by our vet team and our rehab team, there's no better sight than seeing them leave, and hopefully we never see them again and they go back to contribute to their species. Now, the medical side, we have incredible expertise on how do we fix injured animals? How do we get them back to the wild? But we would rather be out of business at the Raptor Center, right? We would rather these animals not get hurt to begin with. So we really, really emphasize the education side of things. We have an incredible education team. You've already met two of the members, with Evan and with Bubo, but about 30 birds that are non-releasable birds. So all of our education birds would not survive in the wild if they were to be released. It could be they had a physical injury that now doesn't allow them to fly as well, or doesn't allow them to hunt as well, or something that is not going to enable them success if we were to put them back. Now, not every injured bird can be an education bird if they can't be released. Some might have injuries that cause chronic pain so that they're going to hurt every day. Some have temperaments that they're just never going to adapt to human care, right? And they're going to be constantly stressed. So we do a huge evaluation process on what birds are able to adapt, be comfortable. Their welfare is our greatest priority to make sure that they actively participate. We ask them them to join us in education. We make the deal pretty sweet with tasty treats and keeping them in safe environments, because we find they can be the best educators out there for us. They can tell stories that we can't. And they go incredible places. And this is the 180 of the degrees that Evan was talking about, that the owl can turn their heads. But these, we go into classrooms, we go all across the state of Minnesota. We have incredible support from the Environmental Natural Resource Trust Fund, from the Cargill Foundation, and other donors and supporters that let us take programs free of charge into schools that wouldn't otherwise be able to have us. So really excited about our ability to take the messages of the clinic out into the public, activate the community on what they can do to help the animals in their yard. And a lot of the pre-submitted questions had questions about that, right? How do we activate people? Now with COVID, of course, we went digital just like everybody else. So we're able to get you closer to that bald eagle than you could get if you came into the classroom yourself, right? Because of safety concerns and things like that. But incredibly, it's always exciting to be able to tell that story, to be able to use the Raptor ambassadors themselves. And I think, Megan, it's about time to try to maybe go to another ambassador, because they've heard me talking enough. I think we might have Scout on deck, if I remember correctly.
We do. Here he is. So this is Scout. He's one of our red-tailed hawks. He's actually a western morph red-tailed hawk, which is a little bit less common to see here in Minnesota. We get mostly eastern morph red-tailed hawks. There are actually 14 different subspecies of red-tailed hawk across the North America and Central America. But the most common one we get here in Minnesota is the eastern. Now, Scout comes to us actually from Oregon, where he was kept illegally as a falconry bird and then confiscated by Oregon Fish and Wildlife. And so he is improperly socialized to people. So he's a little bit different than Bubo in that he's not really an imprint. He wasn't taken from his parents, and that's a really good sign. That shows me that he's nice and comfortable. He wasn't taken from his parents too young, but he was captured and then not fed by people. And so he learned to associate people with food. And so he doesn't really have a good grasp of how to hunt for himself. And so unfortunately, even though there's nothing physically wrong with him, he does have to spend the rest of his life under human care because he never really learned those behaviors to be successful in the wild. Red-tailed hawks are really awesome because they're so common. We can see them all over the place. I usually see one on almost every program that I'm driving to for the Raptor Center. They love to hunt along highways, and you'll often see them sitting up on light poles. One of the things you'll notice is he's got kind of this stripy underbelly. That's a very characteristic marker of a red-tailed hawk. So you can see that dark belly band that kind of goes across his chest. But that's a really good way to tell a red-tailed hawk sitting from the front if you can't see their tail. Because from underneath, their tail looks pretty white. If you are looking at it from behind, and you might actually turn around for us, we'll see. But you can see that kind of nice rusty red tail. And that's very characteristic of a red-tailed hawk as well. Unfortunately, we do get some red-tailed hawks into the clinic with car collisions or found at least on the side of the road because they do spend so much time hunting along highways and other roadways because often the food garbage that people will throw out of their cars will attract rodents and other scavengers to the side of the road, where red-tailed hawks will pick them off really easily because they're such good prey. Red-tailed hawks are generalists, which means that they're not very picky about what they eat. Pretty much if they can catch it, they'll eat it. So they'll eat snakes, they'll eat mice, they'll eat rabbits, whatever they can catch, they can eat. Scout is actually one of our excellent education birds because he does do some flight occasionally. So we'll have him for programs like that. And that's a really enriching activity for him to be able to stretch his wings a little bit. So he's really, really good about staying on this perch until I ask him to leave. But he does a really good job showing off his, being a really good ambassador for his species and showing off some of the really cool things about raptors. You'll notice that his eyes are much smaller than Bubo's that we saw comparatively. He's hunting during the day, and so he is not needing that big low light vision that owls have. But you'll also notice that he has a much more pronounced brow ridge over his eyes, which helps keep the sun out of his eyes when he's soaring. Because in addition to perching really high, red-tailed hawks also like to soar. We call them 2x4s because they're about 2 feet from head to tail and about 4 feet wingspan. So they're very rectangularly dimensioned birds, so that makes them easy to spot as well. I think that's all we're going to have from Scout for now, but thank you again, and we'll be back with another bird in a little bit.
Yeah, I know it's hard to keep coming after the birds because we could just spend the entire hour having you meet some of the fantastic ambassadors here at the Raptor Center. So we will have at least, I think, one other bird that will be joining us this evening before we close down at the end of the hour. But if you want to see all 30 plus of our education ambassador birds, we're open 6 days a week for tours, Tuesday through Sunday. We have incredible volunteers who give tours, they give programs. As Evan said, there's even some flighted programs where you'll see birds like Scout Fly, which we know is such an essential part of a raptor's life. So, please come on by and see us if you haven't already. We have the clinical medicine, right? The veterinary medicine, the rehabilitation, the education that's so essential to engage everybody in how to care. And at the Raptor Center, in our 50 years of history, we're able to use every patient that comes in. Remember, over 1,000 patients a year. And we like to say we use them as a lens, right? We're talking about apex predators. We're talking about top of the food chain. These are birds that are great indicator species for what's happening in that environment. And with every patient that comes in our door, we can learn more about that health. And a lot of these concerns are things that impact other animals, that impact potentially the plant life, and that are happening in the same space that we as, Minnesotans or people in the US or people on this world are also going to be experiencing as well. So we see it as a huge opportunity to not just help every bird get the best possible chance, but also our obligation to learn from them on what is happening on population levels. We call it One Health. And One Health, if you haven't heard, is this idea that human health, animal health, environmental health, they're all interconnected. And when we talk about grand challenges, I talk to freshmen about grand challenges, as we call them, those messy, wicked challenges. One said if they had easy answers, we would already have solved them, right? These big health challenges happen at this intersection. And we're going to talk just a little bit briefly, so we have time for questions, about how we use raptors and the work coming out of the Raptor Center to lead on this. So what we think is that, we can play a world in this population monitoring. We can sample from the wild population of the animals that come in. Now for the all of the brilliant people on this call, you're saying, but aren't you getting ill birds, right? That's not a true sample from the wild population, and you are correct. So there are obviously limitations. Our animals are sick enough or ill enough or compromised enough, someone can grab them, right? And put them in a box and get them to us. We saw during flu, though, we caught a very similar surveillance of different virus genotypes of high path as they found in wild bird surveillance, which took a lot more resources and time, right? So you have to understand what population we're looking at. There's quite a lot of things we can learn. One that we got a lot of questions in the pre-question, so I wanted to cover here, is the issue of lead. Lead is one of the most frustrating things that we deal with here at the Raptor Center because it can take a gorgeous, bold, strong, bald eagle and just a size of the grain of rice of lead can end its life. And they come in blind, and they come in neurologic, they come in seizing, just horrific suffering in these birds. And by the time they get that sick, past studies with things like CT scans has shown us that their brains are essentially damaged beyond repair, and that bird's never going to be able to have a recovery. So humane euthanasia is the only tool we have left to relieve suffering. So lead is a humongous issue. We think about it mostly with our scavenging species, bald eagles, as well as vultures. Now, it's a great case study that I often take a lot of my students that I teach through because it's one where we thought we knew what was causing it, right? We thought the poisonings were happening from waterfowl hunting. And in fact, there was even all sorts of movements. The bald eagle was endangered and other activities that happened that worked towards a federal ban on hunting waterfowl with lead ammunition, right? We like to say problem solved. We solved it, it got banned. There shall be no more lead toxicity in eagles. Well, because the Raptor Center collects such a wealth of data, we were able to track toxicities before the ban. You can see there, and toxicities after the ban, and you can see just real quickly, those numbers didn't go down to nothing, right? It showed that we probably did not get the true source of how these animals were being poisoned. And in fact, what we know today is that most likely the majority of these guys are getting poisoned because of unintended consequences related to the ammo type being used for deer hunting. You see, lead ammunition is a very soft metal. So when lead rifle ammunition is shot, this is a deer carcass that was shot with a lead rifle ammunition, the ammunition will break apart into like the grains of sand, right? It scatters throughout that carcass. And oftentimes hunters will field dress carcasses, which is very routine, and leave the gut pile in the woods. Well, unfortunately, that gut pile is a gorgeous, healthy, nutritious meal for a bald eagle. And the strongest bald eagles will fight over who gets to eat the most. And unfortunately, that means that they also get the most lead if that deer was shot with lead ammunition. And they come into us very compromised. If the lead is still in their system, we will try to flush it out of their system if we see it on x-rays. 80 to 90% of bald eagles that come into our center have some level of lead in their blood, and no level is normal, just like people. About a third of those will have a toxic level where it has damaged their organs so much that they have no chance of surviving. Now there's hope though, because this is completely preventable, right? And we know that the United States needs responsible hunting. It helps us manage our wild populations. It helps us keep healthy ecosystems. So what we have been doing and what we chat about are how do we make sure everyone is being stewards of wildlife? So we do some great interactive activities with different hunter groups, shooting different objects with the different types of ammunition. Here you can see the lead ammunition on the left goes into all the different fragments, where if you use something alternative like copper on the right, it just kind of mushrooms up, right? But really you're ending up with that lead dust from the lead bullets that's contaminating those gut piles, leading to a lot of unintended scavenger species, not just eagles, right? There's more out there. There's great work being done on trying to really understand what animals are eating those gut piles. So, simple changes that can happen, even as simple as, ammunition metal type, that can literally save animals out there in the wild. Because of the data that we're collecting, we can really see the impact of our choices and decisions. In just 2 more minutes, we'll talk about a couple broad examples, but then we want to get to the question part. The microbiome and antimicrobial resistance, those are fantastic topics that are very cutting edge right now when it comes to health. We're finding resistant genes for things all over the place in very remote places where you shouldn't find resistant genes for antibiotics, as well as in very populated areas. We have questions, right? What does the microbiome look like in that wild animal? What does it look like after an animal's been through rehab? What kind of resistance are we finding coming in straight from the wild with animals that have never received treatments or antibiotics, right? And how are they getting exposed? Is it in our waterways? Is it in their food sources? How can we learn more? Emerging infectious diseases, we already talked about avian influenza. West Nile virus is a major one that we see impacting our birds. And guess who it also impacts? The people that share that environment as well, right? So we can look for West Nile cases in our birds as an indication that those mosquitoes are back out. And in fact, we actually work with the health department. The health department here in the state of Minnesota is phenomenal. Their zoonotic disease unit, or diseases that can go between people and animals, unbelievable. They helped us with highly pathogenic avian influenza, and they work with us with anything else that might transmit between people. So we're very lucky. Climate change. If anybody noticed, if you're in the state of Minnesota, we have some weather changes happening. These weather changes are going to be causing changes in prey items and insects and movement of animals. Raptors are great to study because they are able to move if the area doesn't sort those or doesn't fit them, right? You can see the kestrel on the right actually got its feet burned during a drought time when it landed on some hot pavement, nests coming down like the great horn on the left. So we get back to that One Health idea, right? Environmental, human, animal health, they're all interconnected. We at the Raptor Center have a strong passion to give second chances to every bird that we possibly can get into our hospital, but also through those birds, we're able to learn more about the ecosystem. And then we're able to take all of this expertise that's just spilling out of the building here, and share it on a global level, working with other countries and working across the US, to make sure that the future of raptors and the environment is as bright as possible. So with that, I will turn it back over to our MC Will. And I think we also at the same time are going to get another raptor up on the screen, because it's always better if we have some extra raptors within things. And maybe Evan can get real close up with this particular one. Evan, I'll have you just do a quick introduction and then we'll turn it over to Will.
Excellent. So this is Maller. He's one of our American kestrels, which is the smallest species of falcon that we get here in Minnesota. And he is also telling me he's nice and comfortable by giving me a little rouse where he floofs his feathers. And he is having some mouse today. So he's got a little mouse tail that he's working on. And he's going to hold it in his foot because he's a falcon, and that's what falcons like to do. But yes, Maller's a kestrel, and he is with us. He's been with us actually for 11 years. So he is one of our older kestrels, but he is a phenomenal ambassador bird and is comfortable doing everything from preschools to nursing homes and everything in between. So we are very, very lucky to have him, even though we would rather he be out in the wild. But we'll be able to watch Maller kind of do his thing while we take some questions.
Beautiful bird. Thank you so much, Victoria and Evan. Really appreciate this wonderful presentation. So first question we have up is, where are the natural habitats a person can watch for eagles or hawks in Minnesota?
Oh, that is a fantastic question, because it's probably right outside your door, right? We are very, very lucky here in the state of Minnesota that we have incredible habitat for a wide variety of raptor species. So really all across the state of Minnesota, you're probably pretty close to things like hawk nests or owl nests or eagle nests. Certainly you can be more prone to find certain species in certain places. Eagles do like to fish, right? We're fortunate to have quite a few waterways here in the state of Minnesota, right? So nests are often not far away from different waterways. In the winter, you will find spectacular gatherings of eagles once the river freezes, and there's usually just a couple open water spots. You can find up to 200 eagles gathering around limited open water, but you got to get the river to freeze, and that was a conundrum this year, to get those gatherings of eagles. But really, if you're walking outside at dawn and dusk, keep your ears out for some of those owl hoots. Keep your eyes open as you're just driving the highways, as Evan said, for those red-tailed hawks sitting on the light poles over. So we're really fortunate that they're really widespread across Minnesota.
Great. Next one is, what advice would you give a little girl who is very interested in working at the Raptor Center in the future when she grows up?
Oh, that is a fantastic question. What advice? Going in, there's going to be work in the environmental world for a long time, if I can say anything, unfortunately. These are, grand challenges that we've shown in the past we can address environmental issues. We brought the eagle back from almost extinction, right? We brought the peregrine falcon back, but there are constantly new and emerging issues. So if someone has a passion for raptors or for conservation or for animals, right? The best thing you can do is try to get more experiences, right? Find different facilities where you can come and you can experience and you can learn more. Volunteering. Nowadays, there's a lot more opportunities that are also paid volunteers, which we believe, especially for youth, right? Paid internships that people can do. Going into some of the different STEM fields is always very exciting as well. So I guess advice would be to be able to get as many experiences and exposure to really learn what you're passionate about, so that you can then make connections down the road.
Thanks, Victoria. Next is the Raptor Center at the U of M unique in some aspects compared to other Raptor facilities?
Absolutely. Oh, that's a great question. Thank you. The Raptor Center is an incredibly special place. So I came from the Smithsonian Institution out in Washington, D.C. most recently. And I was so excited to come for the honor and privilege to be here at the Raptor Center because of how special it is. So, I mentioned earlier, we function essentially as a nonprofit, especially from a budget standpoint. We've got about 22 amazing staff, over 300 volunteers, 30 Raptor ambassador birds, right? That make up what we do with our education and our clinic. But because of our connections to the university, right, we're able to do things, we're able to share knowledge on a much bigger level, to make those really big partnerships and relationships. We've got a couple different countries we're working with right now on their Raptor rehabilitation programs. We're able to take our expertise that we have here sitting on the St. Paul campus, right, of the University of Minnesota. And we're able to do this high level of research and outreach and sharing and training, and handle the number of birds that we handle, which is quite a lot for a Raptor Center, that, a smaller standalone facility might just not have the capacity to do.
Great, thanks. Next up, we have a question. What do you consider is the biggest challenge facing Minnesota birds, our bird friends, in the years to come?
Absolutely. The biggest challenge. I think you have to say the biggest challenge are people. And at the same time, I'll give the cheesy answer that the biggest opportunity is also people, right? So, we are living in a world with wildlife. There's never going to be a pristine world where the wildlife live over here and the people live over there, right? So we're all growing and changing, adapting together. Wildlife is unbelievable at being able to adapt. They can adapt to changing forces and landscapes. The challenge right now, though, is that humans are pressing the gas pedal of that change faster than wildlife can adapt. So what that means is that we are causing pressures with changing landscapes, with putting things like lead or chemicals into our environment, with putting other hazards with buildings, how we build our cities, how we build our development. Mallard is a great example, as kestrel numbers are currently in the decline. Multiple different hypotheses of why that's the case. They primarily eat insects, and we know we use a lot of pesticides out there in our world. They also have habitat that's really good for making home developments on, right? So they're probably also challenged with habitat loss. So we can see trends in these birds about what is happening potentially because of the impact of human actions. So, but we always like to say the hope, because if humans are the ones that are causing challenges, that means humans can also be the ones to help with the solutions and to help with the protection. So that's why we're passionate about telling the story of the birds.
Great, thanks. Next up is a question asking about what are the best practices for someone to successfully rescue an injured owl, hawk, or eagle and bring that bird into a rescue facility when they come across it?
Yep. My answer is always going to be pick up the phone. Especially, even smaller non-raptor animals, right? There are things that can transfer from animals to person. There are physical injuries that an animal can cause to you, and you can also potentially cause problems to the animal that you're trying to rescue, even with fantastic intentions. So we're very lucky. The Raptor Center is very happy. We have Libby and Max, if you ever call, at our front desk, who will give you just spectacular advice. Watching them talk through somebody on the phone how to contain an injured bird is amazing. And they've FaceTimed people that get you to send videos so they can help advise. The Wildlife Rehab Center of Minnesota is an amazing resource for the non-raptor animals as well. So really, and all sorts of other smaller rehabbers and rehab centers across the state of Minnesota and across the country, if you're not here in the state, they can talk you through things. But the number one thing being making sure that we keep you safe, making sure we keep that animal safe. And for example, the Raptor Center will even send some of our volunteers out if needed to help contain an animal.
Great, thanks. A follow-up sort of question to that, or a deeper dive into that, is, are there any cautions to consider if thinking about, are there any diseases that people should be aware of if handling a wild bird, or anything like that that people should be aware of?
Yeah, so you're going to get my epidemiology hat on here, because we spoke about animals from the Wildlife Rehab Center as well, and some of those animals, like raccoons or bats or other mammals, as well as birds, as well as reptiles. They're wild animals, right? So there are a number of different diseases from, rabies in animals like bats, to salmonella in some of our reptiles or some of our bird species. Highly pathogenic, even influenza, while extremely rare, is potentially zoonotic and go to people. So there's all sorts of different precautions. So again, another reason, um, you are going to find the injured animals that need help, and you're going to be the superhero there. But calling before you intervene to make sure first the animal needs help, because sometimes they don't always need help. And sometimes we can just watch from a distance. And second, what is that best way to rescue so that you keep yourself safe, and you keep the animal safe?
Great. So you touched a little bit about this topic in your presentation, but asking about the TRC's process when handling an injured bird, asking once an animal is submitted to the TRC with a significant injury, this person would like to know more about what you do to calm that bird down or work with them or handle them to ensure a good outcome.
Yeah, so again, we're watching Maller like floof up on the glove right now. And as Evan mentioned, that's like our most favorite thing because it shows he's nice and comfy, because he is a full-time educator now and he'll be with us his whole life. But for most birds, my medical director, Dr. Dana, sometimes calls it an alien abduction. Like, what must it be like to end up in the hands of another species, to be put in a box, to be put in a vehicle, to then come into this facility where you're pulled out and stretched and interacted with? So we do all sorts of things to try to keep that bird as calm as possible. Especially with raptors, if we can take away the light, so if we can keep them in dark spaces, it can help calm them. If we can keep them in a little bit of closer spaces, that's helpful. When we bring them out, we are very careful with keeping our voices very calm and very quiet. We will use gas anesthesia for a lot of our exams, so that they're asleep during the exam, right? So that especially things that are painful, if they have broken wings, we'll use pain control medications, of course, but also anesthesia can help. And because of how birds fly, their respiratory system is super cool, that the gas anesthesia will allow them to go to sleep very quick because they're very efficient respiratory systems, and they wake up very quick. And we always have our volunteer handlers monitoring their breathing. So it's a great tool we can use to help reduce stress. So we try to have them out as little as possible, as minimal impact as possible, and then get them into the wild where they belong, and hopefully go in to tell their buddies like, oh my gosh, what just happened to me? Never going back there.
I love that. We have a question here about some trends and data that you're finding. What percent, you may have talked about this, but to reiterate, what percent of injured birds are successfully released back into the wild in general? What might prevent a bird from being able to return to the wild?
Yeah, so we did mention this earlier, where some birds are coming in and they've just got mortal wounds, right? And they've been potentially hit by a car, and then they've been on the ground and they're starved and they're anemic and they have infected wounds and broken bones. And oftentimes with those cases, humane euthanasia to relieve suffering is the only tool we have left, to be very frank. For the ones that have a chance, though, and get fully admitted to our hospital, we get around 60% back out into the wild. And our medical director will say, because we get ambitious with what we want to try on, that we really try to give anyone with a sliver of a chance to get back to the wild. But we're not going to release a bird that isn't going to survive when we put them back, right? So oftentimes we will try to get, they might not heal, their condition might be worse than we initially thought, or they might just be too sick when they came in, that despite medical treatment, they don't get back. So from the ones that get admitted, fully admitted, about 60% will go back home.
We have time for one question here, one more question that's a nice detailed question. It's about tips to help local species survive where this resident lives. Thinking about improving outcomes for our bird species, what can an average person do to help a bird species survive if this bird is their neighbor, whether that's in an urban setting where a merlin might be hunting from a perch high atop an electrical substation, or a landowner in rural Ottertail County that has frequent barred owl sightings. So what can an average person do to help the birds in their environment?
That is our most favorite question. Evan, do you want to take a swing at this one and tell us a few things that we can leave people with in their mind?
Yeah, I think I can certainly try. I think the biggest thing is look with your eyes and don't interact with wild animals if you can. Don't feed them. We have 2 eagles here that are actually so socialized to people because they were fed as juveniles that they can no longer be released into the wild. So respecting their space just as they respect yours, and not intervening with their lives. With smaller species like screech owls or kestrels, you can either build or purchase nest boxes to put up on your space if you have space like any sort of wooded areas where those species might like to nest. Kestrels tend to like a little bit more open space, so they'll kind of be on a tree near a big open field if that's somewhere where you live or spend time. Screech owls tend to like slightly more wooded areas, but having a nest box up is a really good way to encourage some neighbors to move in. And then you get the really cool experience of watching baby kestrels or baby owls maybe emerge into the world, which is pretty phenomenal. Keeping your litter in your car, don't throw it on the side of the road, really helps red-tailed hawks. If you find baby owls, especially great horns, they'll often still be being cared for by their parents. So if you're worried about them, you can always give us a call, but more often than not, they're just fine where they are, and you can kind of keep an eye on them and leave them be, and their parents will do the work for you. Oh, there's a big stretch. I know. He's kind of getting tidied up after he had his dinner. He's stretching and showing off his tail feathers for us. But yeah, the biggest things that you can do are kind of just all those little everyday things where you're making sure that you are respecting their space and making sure that we're not intervening too much. Bird safe glass is another huge one. We get a lot of birds that come in with trauma from collisions every year. So if you can put up film or stickers or something like that, especially if you have large windows that can let birds know that they're not actually flying into the sky, but that there is glass there, that can make a huge difference as well. Yeah, there's a lot that you can do. And then like bigger things like advocating for policy that will impact things like climate change or conservation policy, advocating for taking lead out of hunting and things like that, for alternative ammunitions like copper. So there's a myriad approach. There's not ever going to be one magic solution that's going to fix everything. But if we all kind of do a little bit and do what we can, it does make a huge difference in all of these birds' lives. And you can tell Mallard is very comfortable with this whole situation because he's feeling happy enough to take a bath in front of you all. So he's given himself a little clean.
Thank you so much, Evan. I
Thank you,
love
Evan.
how that question was posed because they called them neighbors, right? And that just acknowledgement that we're just all living in the same space, right? So, you know, how do you be a good neighbor, and how do you know what you're putting out into your environment that others could get into, and how do you know the unintended consequences you might have with some of your actions? So that awareness and that engagement is what's going to help protect everybody. So thank you so much, Evan.